One comment I've repeatedly heard about Gurren Lagann, both from fans and detractors, is that the show's entire draw is its untoppable, absurd, ridiculously manly action. That those looking for good writing, nuanced characters, or explored themes really shouldn't expect much out of the show. And every time I hear these sorts of comments, I have to wonder if we had watched the same thing, since for me the most interesting aspect of Gurren was how it handles themes of growth and loss in a nuanced and complete way, not generally seen in other media. And of course, expect spoilers for the entirety of the show. When I started watching Gurren, I honestly wasn't a huge fan of Kamina. Sure, his over-the-top personality lived up to the memes, but in practice I found he came off as flat and somewhat unlikably thick-headed, being overly willing to throw away his, Simon, and the others' lives out of a strict allegiance to constantly picking pointless fights. And as a result, besides being an epic self-contained moment, I didn't feel much of anything at his dramatic death. Sure, a bit of characterization added after the fact subverted some of his one-dimensionality, but it still wasn't anything I hadn't seen before. After all, how many times have we watched confident mentor characters die dramatic deaths halfway through a show or movie, conveniently spurring on the main character's development into a confident badass? But what's really interesting is that Kamina's death isn't halfway through the show, it's halfway through the first half of the show. And after the main bad guy is defeated and Simon's arc is ostensibly complete, we get a time skip in what is basically an entire second season with Simon filling the older, confident badass role that Kamina had defined in the first half. But despite being dead and with an older Simon filling his shoes, Kamina isn't entirely gone from the show. The writers seem to have gone to significant effort throughout the remainder of the series to emphasize how much the characters, especially Simon and Kitten, not only remember and idolize Kamina's legacy, but define their own current actions and roles in relation to him. This is brought up again and again, from Simon talking to Kamina's statue at the start of the second half, to Kitten explicitly admitting he isn't able to measure up to Kamina near the climax of the final battle. Moreover, even characters who aren't attempting to follow in Kamina's legacy still end up defining themselves in relation to him, most notably Rousseau, whose post-timeskip ethos is a knowing rejection of the philosophy Kamina represented. Kamina's overwhelming personality meant that his sudden death in Episode 8 created a hole in the worldview of those who knew him. A hole that they're all still trying to fill 7 years later in their different ways, either by trying to live up to him, or by trying to prove to themselves that it isn't a goal worth pursuing. And showing this aspect of loss with such nuance, not the dramatic crying and moping kind, but the kind that remains after years and years and years, is so unique in the general media landscape. Normally it seems like narratives treat the emotional response to loss as a binary. Characters are sad and upset, then after some time they learn some lessons, get over it, and move on. But when losing someone as influential to you as Kamina was to the Gurren gang, it doesn't usually work like that. They're part of who you are, and even after they've been gone for years, one can't help but still thinking about how things might be different if they were still here, and how we might be living up to, or failing to live up to, their legacy. And this is why I'm so confused I don't see more talk about this aspect of Gurren Lagann. It was so seemingly important for the show to deal with these themes that it sacrificed its most charismatic, quotable character after only a fourth of the show's runtime, trusting the payoff would be enough to keep fans watching for not only 7, but 19 more episodes after the death of who was likely their favorite character. But I think more than that, the show questions whether the characters are entirely correct in their reverence for Kamina. In the desperate final battle, there is a definite sense among the cast that if Kamina was here, he would be able to do something about it. That he would be able to overcome the odds that they can't and guide them to victory. But would he? Because in the end, Kamina died in what could barely be considered a skirmish compared to the scope of the final conflict. Would he have been able to navigate the complicated post-war bureaucracy better than Simon? At this point, has his bravery and bravado truly not already been matched by multiple members of the cast? And what else would Kamina have to contribute beyond that unwavering bravery? More importantly, would Kamina, if he had lived through those complicated 7 years between the show's halves, even have been the same person as the crew remember him from his final days? But the Gurren crew don't even consider these questions, because when someone's been gone for that long, as the memories of them become less clear, one can't help but to remember them as a simplified, idealized version of the complex and multifaceted person they actually were, for all the complexities to fade away, leaving only a few well-remembered characteristics that we can still clearly recall. What's important to those that remember Kamina is that up to his death he was, from their point of view, exactly what they needed at that time, someone willing to fearlessly challenge the status quo that they were all shackled by. And in their desperate and lonely moments, that's the image of Kamina they invoke for the strength to overcome. not as the 18-year-old kid clinging to overzealous bravado for fear of ever backing down, but as the fearless leader they saw, who never lost hope and who always found a way to push through to a seemingly impossible victory. Because by that climactic final battle, after those 7 years, that's all that remained of him.